Thanks very much for having me. I'm really grateful for the honor. I'm grateful for the honor because of the fact that we've only started to do architecture, I guess, or even something remotely related to architecture in the past 5 years. And I think what's unique about our work is that we've come to doing this after a lot of years of doing research projects. And the research projects, to a large degree, is what motivates the way in which forms are generated in the formal things that we do. And the research work that I've done at C-Lab, a research unit that I have at Columbia, in many ways is the generative source for a lot of the thinking that's involved. Even to the extent of saying that, that with the work that we do at C-Lab, that it's a form of research, but it's not research in the sense of gathering facts and then presenting those facts. It's more that what we try to do is to give form to content. And that's to say that we take a broad range of content that we collect, attempt to distill what we believe to be the salient aspects or points of that content. And then, most importantly, to try to find a viable form to communicate that information. And that form might be a diagram, it might be a book, a text, a photo essay, a magazine article, or a video. And the decision of what type of genre of form to use is part of what we do as a research enterprise. And then once we do decide on the form that we think is the most effective in terms of presenting the information that we've collected, it's not as if our work is done. It's not that if we decide to do a video, that then voila, the video appears. It requires doing design in that particular genre, and the type of refinement that goes on in working on a video versus the type of refinement that would go on in making a book or doing a photo essay is the type of design training that has led to the projects that we do. But before I talk about the design projects, I want to show you some of the content projects, if you will, to give you a sense of the way in which we come up with forms for content. This was an article that we presented in volume 20. The theme of the issue was storytelling, and we want to look back just at how fairy tales work. And we looked at Sleeping Beauty. There are 4 versions of Sleeping Beauty. There's the original one by John Bautista, the Charles Perrault version, the Brothers Grimm version, and Walt Disney. And there's been a lot of editing that's been going on with this particular fairy tale. And we want to try to figure out a way to present the transformations in the fairy tale. So each of the colors represents an edit by a successive contributor or author. So the black is the original by Bautista, the blue are revisions by Perrault, the green is the Brothers Grimm, and then the red is Disney. So you see that over the course of time, a lot has been edited out to the extent that the second half of the fairy tale is no longer with us. And so this type of graphic communication to describe the changing values of a particular text or messaging is something that we want to illustrate through this particular genre. We love photographs. A lot of the work is finding and sourcing photographs as a way to present a point of view. You probably would all agree that cities are places where there's lots of stimulus and that you just need to take a break at certain points of the day in order to get through the day. I would contend that Tokyo is a city that has even more stimuli than New York and other places, and it's perfectly okay to take a nap on the train. And it's probably necessary to take several naps over the course of a day to get through the day. So this is a photo essay that we did with Neil Denari that was in volume 20 as well. and he collected photographs of people in subways taking naps. So this is an inventory of the various types of postures that people would take in the subways. You notice that there are certain features that he's picked up on. The fact that in a place like Tokyo, you might fall asleep and even your black book might fall out of your suitcase, and yet no one's stealing it. The ways in which different demographics sleep on the subway, something that we want to get across. The college student mode of working, the nuclear family, and then just different types of almost balletic posturing that takes place there, as well as the caving glasses and articles here. This one seems particularly distressful, like maybe getting rest, but you're making your body do a lot of work to get that rest. And that idea of sleeping or overstimulation and the need to take a nap is something that spills out of the subways and actually pours into the streets, as you see here, which Neil talks about. Another thing is taking photographs and then editing the photographs. So this is a piece that we did for an issue that was on the theme of power. And what we looked at in this particular issue was forms of power, attributes of power, and of course, hair is a form of power, meaning the particular haircut that you have is a way to display power and influence. These are the haircuts of the 50 standing senators at the time, and you see the compelling similarities between haircuts. And it turns out that that the haircuts are not party affiliated. There are 3 barbers that the men senators go to that cut all of the senators' hairs. And from this form of analysis, we developed a DIY power kit, with the idea being that we could collect a number of different power attributes of powerful figures, and that those things could be recombined by people as they will, as a way to produce influential figures that create changes in places in the world that might need change. So for example, in the Middle East, that there could be a Saudi eco-dictator that could broker peace between Israelis and Arabs. In the US, this was done before the real estate crash. The idea being that a tribal populist real estate mogul could protect the middle class against predatory lending. And also in the US, a homeopathic Surgeon General that would believe in wellness as a form of intervention. Other ways to deal with things like infrastructural and urban policy issues is this form of storytelling through photo collaging. So again, photo collage as the form to describe the point of view of future policy. So in the case that there is a double-dip recession, we're kind of screwed because we've already exercised the 2 forms of relief economically, that is by lowering the interest rate and also by putting a lot of money into our economy. So the proposition here is that if there is a double-dip recession, that the government could begin to sell off underperforming states as a way to downsize and increase capital, and that our vice president from the great state of Delaware, a perennial underperformer, would be the person who would break the news to the nation. Another form, if you will, is that we bootleg other magazines. So this is a bootleg of Urban China, one of the best Chinese magazines, with the idea being that as a US entity, we would take copyrighted intellectual property in China and present it here. So we took articles from Urban China, translated it into English. This is a piece on using disaster rubble from the Sichuan earthquake to build bricks for housing relief. The bootleg itself was under crisis. The theme of the issue was crisis. and the issue itself was in crisis, sort of like my speech at the moment. But as you know, in doing graphic design and putting together books, a big challenge is that you ask maybe 30 people to do contributions, and you negotiate at the very beginning that they do 5 pages of written text and contribute 4 photographs. And then in the end, everyone comes in at different counts. So they might have 5 photographs and only 2 pages worth of text. And it takes a long time, even though you've calculated at the very beginning the number of pages you're going to have in the final publication, just how to lay out all of that material. And for this particular publication, we put together the whole thing in 6 weeks, and there was just no time to do that. So we laid out the design of the magazine as a single, essentially like a single Word document, and we just threw all of the material into the single document and let it flow. So you have articles that begin in the center of a spread and just bleed over to the next page, but the same thing with photographs. So the photographs just continue from page down onward, like so. So in that sense, the design, it wasn't just that we did a bootleg as a way to present material quickly. We also designed within that genre in such a way that modified it to suit the particular demands and constraints of the production. We also do videos. The purpose of the video was to communicate that we think of the elderly as a demographic that's checked out and uninformed of urban issues. And the point of doing the video was to say that maybe they're not so uninformed of urban issues, and maybe in fact that they could be proactively involved in considering urban policy, and maybe they could have great influence in terms of their role in urban policy. So we did the video, and then we also made a book, a copy or an issue of Volume magazine called The Urban Conspiracy, where we revealed the urban conspiracy, which is that all along the people who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s now have been conspiring their whole lives to for a secret plot. And the secret plot is to do good in the world, and that is to improve the conditions of cities. So this theory, which has yet to be disproven, is laid out in the issue. And it all comes from the fact that it seems like it should be surprising that during the recession and through till now, through the start of the recession till now, that in cities like New York, that the quality of urban space has continued to improve. So if you've been to, say, Columbus Circle lately, it's astonishingly beautiful in terms of the way it's manicured, the details, how well kept it is. There are so many other public spaces in New York that have been realized during this time. Same thing with other cities. And perhaps it's no coincidence that these improvements to the urban realm are happening when this generation of people who are in their 70s now have realized their mission. And so the idea is that that the people who are in their 70s now, Europeans, are the last generation of people who grew up or were young when their cities were destroyed, where the urban fabric of their cities were completely decimated. And the trauma of growing up in places like this, we believe, has a lot to do with the idea of producing urban spaces that could be permanently dedicated to public use. As a way to verify some of this information, we looked at some of the cities that were the most devastated during World War II: Dresden, Rotterdam, The Hague, and Trieste. And we found out that the oldest neighborhoods in Europe are in these cities, meaning that the neighborhoods that have the most old people are located here, and those are the neighborhoods that are indicated in the black. So that it must have been the case that the people who were in cities that were the most battle-torn were the most traumatized and never left. This is a generic diagram, if you will, of trauma, of the 5 stages of grief. Trauma on the left, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. It's something that we found in a psychology textbook. This is the frequency of the use of the word city from 1945 to 2010. So you can see the rise and falls of the use of the word city. And if you blur the two together, it's amazing how well they correspond to one another. That there's a moment of trauma, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance over the course of time. We believe some of these people to be the main perpetrators of the conspiracy. We happen to be taking photographs over by the Brooklyn Bridge Park, and they look fairly suspicious. And if you take this diagram of ours, and you overlay the discourse of architecture from 1945 to now, it actually works out fairly well. So you have post-war housing and urban reconstruction, reactions to modernist failures, anger, vernacular design, bargaining, and depression, everyday urbanism, and globalization as a form of acceptance. In doing further research on the matter, we found out that there are many people involved in this conspiracy. I think perhaps some of your parents and grandparents might be involved. And it's no coincidence that great architecture is always filled with old people. They're spies. They're looking out for techniques to use in future public spaces. So this is some documentation of ours of spies at work. Okay, so again, this has yet to be disproven as a theory, but the point would be here that even using conspiracy theory as a form to make a point about the potential of thinking about policies of aging that aren't just, oh, let's take care of the old people and let's just take care of them the way that we know best, but rather that it might be that thinking about age-friendly cities is a thing that could be thought out with the aging as a proactive voice in urban development is the point we want to get across through this form, if you will. So if these content projects break down information to construct containers for ideas, we also do form projects. And the form projects break down the constraints of commissions to conceptualize construction solutions. They give form to form, in other words, in the sense that we problem solve in order to realize structures within the limits of budgets and other constraints. So, for example, with things like this table that we designed for a fundraiser, the given requirement that we had was that we had to provide tables for 60 people, and the formula is that you need 2 linear feet per person, and the whole room was much smaller than was needed, so we just scrunched the linear table into this. This is in the Park Avenue Armory. Another requirement was that the table had to be done for free, that we had to reuse materials, and another requirement was that that we had to install it in a day. And we were able to get the materials donated and coordinated help to build the thing. You know, people got up at 5:30, got the tools, brought them there. The material was delivered at 9 a.m. that day. We got the MDF board for the tables, which we were expecting to be half-inch MDF. And the guys showed up with 1/8-inch MDF. I didn't know that they actually made 1/8-inch MDF. And as you could imagine, the structural capacity of 1/8-inch MDF is fairly limited. We decided that we would exploit the fact that the material was really thin. So what we tried to do was to pull back the linear supports of the table as a way to accentuate the thinness of the table, taking a risk, of course, with what would happen at dinner when dinner was served. Luckily, we didn't have to take out insurance, and there were no liability issues at the end of the evening. But I think in the end, it turned out to be a nicer table because it was so thin, and the last-minute decision to pull in the horizontals a little bit. We've been asked to do a lot of tables for free or nearly free, or for fundraiser events that we've been very happy to do. And we were for a while on a roll with that. This is a table for a fundraiser for Donna Karen's foundation. And the idea nowadays is that everyone does sit at the same table, with the idea being that everyone is in it together for the particular cause. One of the limitations of sitting at a single table together is that you talk to the person to the left and right of you and to the person in front of you, which is really great when the people are super talkative and interested in you. We want to give people an option in terms of who they would talk to. So the geometry of this table is such that, that we made as many intersections as possible so that you could talk across in a number of different ways over the course of the evening. We're doing a research project for Audi Urban Future Initiatives and for Audi America, and and we did research for it. After we did research for it, we wanted to present the research that we did, and of course it was by having a dinner, and they wanted a table designed. So the idea that we came up with was to make humans as part of the menu, all of the people who had done the research sat in the center of this loop-like table, and then all of the guests sat, all of the 85 guests sat around the outside of the table. And with each different course of the dinner, the experts in the center rotated around. You can see that these chairs have rollers, and that the ones on the outside are stationary. And to make use of the table after the event, we designed the table with these particular geometries in such a way that they could be repaired. So this is a table that works for a smaller scale, as well as these. So in addition to tables, we do other scale things. We do pavilions. We've been asked to do a number of pavilions. This pavilion came after a string of pavilions we had done. With this particular one, the unusual circumstance was that the idea was that the pavilion would be only up for 2 hours, and that it also be planned so that it could be assembled within an hour and a half, because the storefront didn't want to take out a permit for this installation. And the idea was that we should set it up as fast as possible so that if the police came, that there wouldn't be any issues or whatever. Or hopefully the police wouldn't come and show up. The police did show up, but it looked so organized, they just thought we had a permit. For this, it's called Suck and Blow. And the theme of the show was landscapes of quarantine. And to play off of the idea of landscapes of quarantine, we quarantine the air inside the storefront. So suck pulls air from the outside into the space, and then blows it out, creating essentially more or less a closed loop within the storefront and for the people inside. Anne was observing that we've done, I think, 5 or 6 information kiosks. This is a festival, this is a kiosk for the Festival of Ideas that took place last May. That was organized by the New Museum, the Cooper Union, Architectural League, and a number of other organizations. We designed 2 information kiosks, one in front of the New Museum and one in front of Cooper Union. It's about 10 feet tall. And for this particular project, it's about what you can do with the constraints to fabricate something and what are the sculptural possibilities within the constraints of a given project. We found out that to have a robot fabricate the project was cheaper than to do it manually. And because it was fabricated by a robot, it gave us latitude in terms of what the form could be. So we used the tool path to shape the form as a design tool, with the idea being that we could make the topography of the information kiosk as sculptural as we wanted to within the technical constraints of the robot in terms of its swing and multiple radii. On top of that, we want to accentuate the fact that it was being produced robotically. So the tool path produces this pattern that we designed in addition to sculpting the topography. It's an interactive kiosk. It has touch screens and video monitors, as well as areas for print information to be displayed. So here you get a sense of the patterning. So in that sense, it's not sculptural to be expressive by any means, but it's rather that the technical means by which the thing was produced informed the extent to which we could be plastic in the form making that we explored. Other things that deal with trying to find the right form for the situation included this commission for a rooftop terrace for X Initiative, which is in the former DIA art space. And the DIA Foundation moved out a couple of years ago. And when they moved out, they also took the Dan Graham roof garden that's on top of the building with them. And we were asked to do a temporary roof garden in its place. So the question was not so much an issue of form per se in terms of what should the form be, because the fact that it was a roof terrace described that to a great degree, but the material was something that we had to generate. And given the fact that it was a summer roof garden, we figured that pool noodles would be the way to go. So we collected, or we used 6,000 units of pool noodles and then cut them into 15,000 pieces to produce this roof garden. It was used for openings, film screenings, and lectures. And so this particular project was really a matter of design and organization. In the spirit of philanthropy and goodwill that we participated in, we also were the recipients of goodwill in that there were 30 volunteers that helped us for 13 days to assemble the 15,000 pieces. Okay, this is a restaurant that we did, a temporary restaurant that we did for the Whitney. It was part of the Whitney Biennial. And it, of course, was something where we were really glad to be able to do a project inside the Whitney, and especially to do it in a place as urban as the double height space of the Breuer Courtyard. And the project spans from the ground level down to below and tries to engage the scale of the double height courtyard. Here you see the three pieces along the front into the restaurant space below, which we designed to open with the biennial. This is it from the ground floor, from the lower floor. So yeah, I think, in terms of statistics on our work, I think we've done 5 or 6 kiosks. We've done a number of really short-term installations. And I think about half of the smaller scale installation works that we've done don't touch the ground. They hang from the ceiling, which presents really interesting structural issues nonetheless. And some of the structural issues that we explore are displayed here and in another project. With this one, we fabricated the chopped shells in California, and it was cheaper to do that than to build them here locally, and they're made out of fiberglass. And this particular one is such that the top shell attaches onto the ceiling at the Whitney, and it supports this ring of light below with the sailcloth. And as a way to create diversity using the same form, we switched it over so that in this case, the white fiberglass shell is on the bottom, and it's supported by the nylon of the sailcloth. This is a commission that we received through a competition. It was an invited competition to do a lighting piece inside of a new opera house in Norway. And we proposed this hanging piece to be a kind of reverse chandelier. So instead of the light being emitted from the outside, light is emitted from the inside, and it just glows on the interior. It's 7 meters in diameter and 13 meters long. And this too is a thing where we wanted to do something that was dynamic formally, but also want to engage the limits of cost that came with the particular project. So the form is generated from a pure cylinder, and it's just the way that the cylinder is chopped and voided out that produces this asymmetrical form. And that this asymmetrical form then frames different views from inside of the space. And then structurally, with this, it's a pin connection that holds up this 8-ton structure. So it's weighted from the top, and because of the way that we slice the cylinder, it finds its natural angle of repose by itself. The form informs what the angle of repose is. And that angle of repose corresponds to the angle of incidence of the sun in Norway, in the city, at key points in the year. We're working with the Argentinian fabricators that did the curtain wall for the Wiley and also for Highline 23. The outside here is a 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter square tubing that's rotated so that it has a diamond profile as it moves around the exterior, spaced out with like 8 millimeters between them. And this is it in fabrication. So we do small projects and we do big projects. And I'll show you a few of the urban design projects that we do. And I'm presenting them here as what we call haiku urbanism. That we try to take the simple or the complex nature of urban planning and present solutions with an economy of moves to create seemingly graphic solutions for complex problems. But graphic in the sense that they would be readable or legible to people other than architects so that they could be immediately understood. This is Chengdu, China. It's a master plan for Chengdu, China. This is the center of Chengdu. They have a green belt around the center. There are mountains over here. The key water sources to the city are from those mountains through rivers. And there's some agriculture here. And it's a really, really fertile area of China. The proclivity is to just continue to make ring roads around the center as a way to address future growth. Instead, we propose to do a half crescent so that the first ring road, or the second ring road, would be the last ring road that they could possibly do as a way to limit this almost knee-jerk reaction urbanism, and then to propose a half crescent of agricultural land to one side of the city that would then help also to keep the water from their water sources relatively clean, and then to encourage development to occur over here. And then also to short circuit any potential future ring road, we did a mutated ring road that would loop around this way and continue the north-south regional connector. There's the regional connector and the half crescent. This is a proposal for Research Triangle Park. And this is a transportation proposal. This is the approved light rail network from Durham through Cary to Raleigh over here. And our proposal is to not do a linear system, but to do a loop system that would just wrap around Research Triangle Park here as a way to produce a backfire effect to sprawl. If sprawl is happening from the center of Chapel Hill, Durham, and Raleigh and Cary outwards, like a backfire in terms of fighting forest fires, what we want to do was to create a settlement here as a way to stop sprawl from happening out here by concentrating growth around the loop in the center. So as growth would occur, our intent is to have densification occur within the loop. Also, our loop is much shorter than the linear length of the approved light rail system. And roughly, it's about $39 million per linear foot, and we save 27% of the total linear length by doing it this way. This is a proposal for a middle-class housing development in St. Petersburg, Russia. We did it in conjunction with Neil Denari. Neil did the buildings, and we did the master plan. And the client wanted to address the fact that in Russia, the middle class are now buying cars, and this housing project had to accommodate the need for the growth in private car ownership. He also wanted the project to be green, but he wasn't really sure how the project could be green. He said, well, if it's going to cost more money to have it green, just paint things green, and maybe that'll be okay. But we persevered, and in this project, we eliminated all the east-west roads. So it provides all the parking that's needed, and the parking follows the Russian requirements in terms of the proximity of parking to apartments. But at the same time, we put in this pedestrian bike path that loops around, that allows people to get from one part of the development to the other without having to drive across. And by eliminating the east-west roads, we eliminated a large percentage of the infrastructure cost. And of course, the infrastructure cost in urban development is a large part of the initial cost. So it's usually between 30 and 35% of the initial construction, and we reduced that amount significantly. This is an urban planning project, or study that we did, I should say, looking at the middle class in New York. And we wanted to just figure out what the middle class is, because the definition of the middle class is so varied depending upon who you speak to. If you look at it just in terms of income, the middle class are people that make between $32,000 and $48,000 a year per household. If you take away the people who spend between 30 and 50% of their household income on housing, you're left with this. If you take away people where the breadwinner of the family makes less than $25,000, you're left with this, or more than $25,000. If you include the people who have homes, who own their homes, you get a little bit back. But if you consider the number of people who are more than 65, you're given this. It's further reduced when you take into account people who only have up to high school educations, and the potential for them to advance in the middle class is restricted. So this is the maximum definition of the middle class, and this is the minimum. We're interested in this in-between zone because those are the people who are the most likely to fall out of the middle class. It's also the case that in looking at this map, that the figuration of this area is very fragmented, meaning that the ability to use traditional urban planning techniques to improve neighborhoods isn't going to work here because of the fact that it's so distributed as it is now. So we're working on coming up with proposals that use other methods to address encouraging the middle class to stay in New York. And then lastly, this is a similar project, an urban planning project that we did for an exhibition in New York, in Los Angeles. This is the Hollywood sign, which was put up by a developer in the 1920s for a development that he did below the Hollywood sign down here. And what's spectacular to us is that the geography of this particular hillside in the Hollywood Hills is no different than the hillside that's to the east and to the west of it. The views, access are no different. And quite possibly, the access to this part is even worse because of the fact that people go here to look at the Hollywood sign. And yet, the property values of the houses below the Hollywood sign are significantly more than those to the east and west. And they've stayed that way far beyond the life of the initial developer and anything that he could have got out of it. So in that sense, the Hollywood sign has done its job, and it's relatively obsolete, that the values of the property will stay. So the proposal is to lease out the letters of the Hollywood sign to other neighborhoods in Los Angeles, middle-class neighborhoods that could use a boost in terms of their property value. And that the anagrams could be produced in terms of the inventiveness of the neighborhood and the correspondence of the neighborhood and the aspirations of the particular neighborhood. That cost is always an issue, so people would lease out as many letters as they could afford, whether it's 4, 3, or 2. Thanks. Thank you.